thank you so much for coming and taking time out of your Saturday afternoon to talk with us today about the fundraising landscape for startups. Just a bit about me. I'm Luann Connor. I'm going to be your moderator for this afternoon. And just a bit about my background. I've got my MBA from Hopkins, from Cary, at the Washington, D.C. campus, and I loved my experience. I had such a great time. I love the conversation, the dialogue, the engagement, that when I left, my poor husband said, finally, you need to find another outlet for that one. So it got me started. I do a bit of teaching. I teach at Golden Gate University, and I teach at UC Berkeley Extension, classes from international business and strategy to managerial analysis and team dynamics to entrepreneurship. And I also have a company. I'm a founder, CEO of a company, Sagacious Think. We help companies or businesses as they're starting to expand, specifically as they're going international, on their business operations, making sure that they have the processes, the structure, understand their risks so that they can succeed and achieve the goals that they set out to do. I also am active with Hopkins. I am on the Alumni Council, and I'm a member of the Dean's Alumni Advisory Board for Cary, and I'm also fairly active here in the Bay Area with the alumni chapters. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention David Gatilis. He is basically helped spearhead this effort, and I don't know how he does it. He's an entrepreneur many times over, an angel investor, and he just launched his own company, the Data Guild. And if you haven't had a chance, ask him some of the neat projects and events that he's working on. But thank you very much also for your help. We are very fortunate today to have 5 esteemed, highly regarded individuals from the startup investment community here in the Bay Area. All of them have ties to Hopkins. And I want to make sure I introduce each of them properly. I'm going to provide short introductions to each of the individuals and ask after I introduce them that they answer the questions. What made you choose to become an investor? And how has Hopkins contributed to your thinking and helping grow companies? All right, so first up on the list, we have Robert Mittendorf.
First of all, before I answer your question, I just really want to thank everyone involved in the day. I think all of us probably get the opportunity to serve on these panels in a variety of capacities, but it's always great to have Hopkins doing more on the West Coast. So just excited to be here to provide whatever limited insight I can to you. In terms of an investing career, I don't think there certainly wasn't a linear path. For me, it was really probably driven by 2 things. The first was in my last role at Hansen, which was a total blast. It's a medical robotics company where I worked with Fred Moll, who founded Intuitive Surgical, on new flexible robotic systems. Having a great time selling. We sold a little over 100 robots. In my last year there, talking to customers head down on selling robots, I realized that, as I'm sure many of you realized probably before I did, that healthcare was changing under my feet. And in discussions in selling systems to CEOs in the US, systems that cost $1 million or more and $2,000 per procedure, with true clinical benefit, we were running into new challenges. And so I kind of zoomed out for a year. And it was during that year of talking to a number of entrepreneurs that I really kind of solidified my interest in moving to the buy side, which was probably the worst time to try to do it, since it was after the last financial crisis and after the pullback in medical investing by a number of firms out there. But I was fortunate enough to find an investment position at a firm who's led by some kind of long-term thinkers who believe that healthcare is still a good place to invest money. And I think that was the first part of the decision. The second was in my conversations with entrepreneurs, which I got to do to some extent as a guy running marketing for a device company. And also before then, I kind of realized how much I enjoy and what a privilege it is to kind of sit down with entrepreneurs every day and look at the world through their eyes. To kind of see what they see. And so those 2 things, in terms of the non-financial aspects, are what drove me to seek an investment position. Of course, I'm interested in making money and for my firm and improving healthcare. But I think those 2 fundamental things, the fact that healthcare has changed dramatically and the fact that I really kind of really have this opportunity to sit with entrepreneurs every day and think about how the world could be better is kind of what drove the decision.
Great, thank you. All right, next up we have Peter Bennett. Peter.
Well, yes. Actually, the way it sounds, I definitely was not linear in how I develop things. But I do have to say I have Hopkins to thank for providing me the guidance and a path forward. I actually used to, and I don't know if many of you did this, but I'd wander around Hopkins and I would look at who was speaking, what sort of programs were going on, and that's really what I enjoyed. I would go and learn about hepatitis treatments. I would learn about aeronautics. I would learn about. It was just such a wonderful place to be with so much learning and so many smart people. And one time I did take an evening class with Bill Miller, who managed Value Trust at Legg Mason. And he really sparked a lifelong love of the investment process. And after that, I really wanted to get into investment management. So pretty much right after I graduated, I jumped on a flight over to London and I started wandering around looking for a job. And I got a job at Morgan Stanley Asset Management, and there were only 4 portfolio managers. But I used to show up at each and every meeting. I would be there from 6 in the morning till late at night, any meeting that I could go to, just to learn and see what was going on. And so I actually wasn't even a fully fledged employee at the time. I was just an intern. When the investment team came over from New York and said they had a project for the to start the Turkish investment fund, and would be working with the World Bank. And who wanted to do this? And so I sort of raised my hand, and they said, "Well, yes, that's fine, Peter Bennett." And then a couple of months later, they learned that I was an intern. So anyway, I was very rapidly hired, and then I thought that I could potentially do things my own way. And after about 5 years at Morgan Stanley, I decided to go out and start Bennett Capital, which was long, short, emerging market stocks. And so pretty much if there's a stock market in a country, I've been there. And I would go and I would sit in little cars, such as Tofaş's in Turkey, which is one of the markets I know very well. And I would basically suffer the fumes as I went and saw 6, 7, 8 companies a day. And it really just, I thrived in that environment, just learning about companies, learning how they operate in different countries. You would learn different accounting techniques or lack thereof, and it just was a very fascinating time. And I have to say, my partner Jack Sorensen with me, we were able to create an emerging market fund that was number 1 in '96, number 1 in '97, which was the Asia crisis, and number 1 in '98, which was the Russia crisis. So we were able to make some good money for our clients. And then when I found out that in 2000 that I was going to be a father, I figured out that I hadn't been in one place for more than 6 days in over 3 years. So I said, it's time to slow down. And that's when I started to look at the distressed debt market. And there's a lot of debt in the United States. And so what we tried to do was be helpful to companies and individuals and create long-term cash flow streams. And as of April 16th, I'm out of that. So now I'm focused more so on a number of things, such as where Luann kindly listed. And I work very, very much, a great deal with a lot of smaller investors with interesting ideas and getting them funded and getting them launched. And that's really my passion, is seeing something created from nothing, really.
All right, thank you. All right, next up we have Paul Matucci. Paul has this awesome quote, so I thought I'd hit the intro with that. The great thing about being an entrepreneur or a venture capitalist is that one gets to view many of the biggest problems the world is facing as opportunities for creativity and solutions.
You know, I never chose to be an investor. It just kind of happened as I graduated from being a CEO to eventually figuring out what to do next. I just got offers to do things like come in and be a venture capitalist. This was 15 years ago, and that was back in the day when I would say most VCs, at least most VCs in Silicon Valley, were former entrepreneurs. That's changed a lot in the last 15 years, where the industry's become much more financially oriented. And the VCs, I mean, the operating people that used to be entrepreneurs are now becoming angel investors and creating a whole nother platform for potential startups to get funded. How Hopkins affected all this, I'm not really sure. I know that, I know that Hopkins was a positive experience for me, and Stanford was a positive experience for me, and my immigrant grandmother who immigrated over here in 1916 and was crippled but commanded a extended family of a couple of hundred Italians with an iron sword. It was a big influence on me, and somehow it all came together. I know that Hopkins is directly responsible, however, actually at an alumni event for me meeting my wife, and therefore for me having my son. So I wouldn't trade it for anything, that's for sure. Now what gets me excited now is working on fixing problems in the food system. I started an organization called Feeding 10 Billion, which is an organization to help entrepreneurs who are targeting improving the food system for both health reasons in developed countries and for sustenance reasons in developing countries. So that's my passion. That's what I'll move to from USVP over the next 3 years or 4 years, depending on how that goes. But that's what I'll be doing in my next career.
I had the pleasure of hearing her speak on numerous occasions, and she graced us last year as the moderator for our first entrepreneurship panel. So I literally have some big shoes to fill today. So Kathy, please.
I have a very short answer. The thing that got me into investing, firstly, was insanity. Secondly, was how fun it is. And thirdly, is a fellowship that I enjoy, both with entrepreneurs and with my fellow angel investors.
All right. Thank you.
But needless to say, I didn't grow up to be an investor in any sense of the word. It's all accidental. I began as an engineer. I ended up working in public service. I've built things for most of my life. I've worked for nonprofits. And a turning point, I suppose, was my going back to grad school mid-career to SAIS, at which point, I can't really say that I understand it much, but I was much more marketable to private sector companies that were looking at doing more of what I had done. That said, I joined a Dutch utility, Nuon. Around the world, we've developed, in the early part of the last decade, we developed 4,000 megawatts of renewable energy projects, beginning with wind, mostly wind. The first projects in China, in India. We were doing solar in Mongolia and solar in South Africa in the rural townships. Needless to say, I was commuting to San Francisco. I could put the office here in America wherever I could fly nonstop. SES. Needless to say, we had a good run there. I bought that company, the subsidiary that was doing that work, in a management-led buyout, led by me. That turned into MMA Renewable Ventures. With that, we raised probably over $1 billion and built another 1.5 gigawatts of renewable energy power here in the U.S. But needless to say, the transition, the whole concept of investing in clean tech as it relates to project finance or building projects, in this case a lot with solar these days, was that we were compelled to go to market to discover new technologies really for the single purpose of improving our profit margins. We could take living, breathing, renewable energy project investments, and we could add in layers of new tech and perfect that new tech in the process, turning those new products into proven technologies, which we could benefit from by having had invested in them. But in the process, we are improving the bottom lines of our project investments. It was all self-serving and was all profit motivated. That said, coming from that, we transitioned into investing and putting money into funds to actually kind of adding and helping to manage the formation and the conveyance of capital to more new tech companies that could benefit from our commercialization engine on the project deployment side. That's what I talk about when I talk about abusing, commercial technologies or proven technologies with new stuff. We abuse the fields of proven with unproven technologies, and in the process, we serve to discover or make commercial new technologies that could never get financed on their own. So we integrate, we blend. Hopkins really made a difference to me. For one, we've hired a tremendous, not a tremendous number, but a good number of SciSce grads. We're always reaching out to SciSce to kind of get people to come and to look at the companies that we invest in and to look at ourselves, quite frankly. We've always had very good experience doing that. I don't mean to speak to the business school or anything.
That's okay.
But all in all, these days I am a big advocate of active involvement, and that just comes from the fact that those companies that we have taken a good, strong position in tend to do well, and the ones that we tend to invest in passively kind of don't do well. And it might simply be centered around a basic concept like cash flow management or forecasting or however you want to look at it. But that said, we are very active in the companies that we get involved with, and I in fact personally I will step up and serve on the boards and help many of these companies kind of get their act together, and as a result I think they do better in my own mind. Anyway, thanks.
All right, so just to kind of kick it off, just kind of going through maybe an arc of experiences from an entrepreneur's perspective. So as an entrepreneur, identifies a problem, is looking to develop the solution for it, and is building a company around it. At what point in the process should they start looking for funding? And I thought maybe Matt, Peter, Kathy, maybe you could take a stab at what you think the timing is in the process. So anyone want to go first?
I'm not any of those things.
I'd be happy to.
Sure.
Well, isn't it when they need money? Is that when the credit card runs out?
It could be. Could be.
And friends and family are no longer listening. Money is weird. There's a value creation kind of curve, and I think we all are aware of it. But the further out you can get without taking money, which is fairly expensive. If it's smart, it's going to be really expensive. And when I say expensive, it's going to ask for a lot. Okay. So the strategy always would be to get as far as you possibly can, and then take some, and then once again get as far as you possibly can, and then take some more, and so forth, and take as little as you can. But the problem is that the cliff is that if you run out of money, it's kind of like this it's a cliff. You fall off and you destroy a lot of value. So it's a bit of a game. The idea would be to get commitments in early, take it when you need to, if you can do it that way, and then hope you don't run out. Because when you run out, you get really distressed and desperate, and then capital is really expensive.
Yeah, I'd have to second that emotion. Hold out for as long as you can. I recently spoke with a company that has been going for about 7 years, and they've had a number of rounds. And the people who have come in as financial investors. They have some great patents. They don't necessarily have the management to move it forward. And now they're in complete rigor mortis. They can't move forward because they already have so many of these investors, disparate investors, that want to be paid out, that almost what they need to do is just shut down and start up all over again with the patents. But now, instead of one person owning the patents, you've got 30 plus investors. And so really the important thing to do when taking in money is to ensure that that money is matched with the opportunity, and that dilution that happens later on isn't something that cripples the company. I've just seen it happen too many times. we've always raised money through investment funds. And so now that the world is changing and crowdfunding and so on is becoming more the parlance of the day, people are using those outlets in order to get the funding they need to bring their project that much further. Angel investing also is a way that people are moving things down the line. But I would just advise, hold off as long as you can, and when you do, make sure that whoever invests isn't going to, in some way, slow down your company's development later on.
Okay, I'm going to take a slightly different view. Capital is the blood of any company. And no company has ever gone out of business for lack of money. And most companies go out of business for lack of capital. So that's point number one. And so it's really important to think about your capital strategy. That does not mean to say that you should raise money when you can't have a good use for it. On the other hand, holding out as long as you can means that oftentimes you suboptimize your time to market, your development process, even your solution. And so the real right thing to do is to be very smart about when you ask for money, how much you ask for, and what it's put to use for. You want to make sure the capital is productive. And your investors are going to be exactly in the same place as you. The investors who go in early in an R&D situation when there's no hope of actually productizing in time, to me, were not great investors to begin with. And then you end up with situations like what Peter had discussed.
All right, so timing is
Timing is very key.
absolutely. Okay, so timing is key. What's the next step? How should they go about seeking that funding? Paul, Robert, do you have any insights on that one? There's it here.
Sure. How should you go about seeking funding? I mean, have a story, have a team, understand the domain that you're operating in, and then begin to network. And network the story so that when you get to me or somebody like me, you get to me through somebody I already know and respect. There are other ways to get to funders, but the most effective way is to get your deal referred. Now, not everybody works that way, but I would say most professional institutional investors are tremendously more likely to consider your investment if it's been referred than if it has somehow just come directly from you or over the transom somehow. We occasionally do something over the transom, and over the transom just means literally over the transom. I mean, it just slips under the door and something catches your eye, but it's extremely rare. So it's all about networking, but have your story ready. Know your story and know it because it comes from your heart, and know it because you study your delivery, because you never know when the situation is going to come up. You're going to be flying in an airplane and the person next to you is a venture capitalist, or the person, and for me, I never know when I'm going to get on an airplane and have the person next to me be an entrepreneur that I'm going to try to convince to let me give them the money, because that's what I want, right? I want to find people where I just can't wait to write them a check. Not where they have to, drag me over the goal line kicking and screaming.
So just to add a couple of other points there, I agree entirely with everything Paul just said. Just a couple of other things is, especially today, it's a lot easier to get noticed, I think. I mean, just to be honest, part of our job is to go out and hunt for companies. So we are at conferences, we talk to people, we network to try to hunt entrepreneurs all day. And it sure is a hell of a lot easier if you can get yourself noticed. So whether that's through startup organizations in my field like Rock Health or Startup Health or Blueprint Health, or whether it's through, we have a lot of relationships with key customers, which I will tell you that certainly in healthcare software, healthcare IT, one way of financing your company is maybe a little bit after the credit card stage, is finding a customer that will pay you early and help you develop that first product, so that when you come to talk to either angels or, God forbid, venture capitalists who are going to, start thinking about price, that you have something of real value. And so I would say get noticed. I completely agree. You always have to be selling. As an early stage CEO, you're selling to customers. You're always going to be on. You're always going to be selling, whether it's on a plane, whether it's at a conference, whether it's at your gym. You might run into someone that may end up with a connection to someone. And that warm intro is always important. But I would really look for opportunities in creating visibility for whatever you're doing through publications, through social media if you have that opportunity in the kind of company you're working at, of course, and then through other more traditional means.
All right. Thank you, Robert. And that's a good segue into the next question. And Matt and Peter, if you could take a stab at responding, who should they approach for the funding? You mentioned potentially a target customer might be an ideal way to do it, but is there kind of an order to this? Is it angels, VCs? Is there, what does it depend on the situation? Could you offer some insights around that?
How about everybody? No, no, I fundraising is hard. If you see lots of, I've done a lot of fundraising in and around putting together what we call pledge funds and pools, and that are essentially searching for opportunities. It's a little bit different from what we're talking about here, but it can take time, and it can take more time. It's nice to have a company that's an easy sell. But some good ideas out there, for a lot of different reasons, as we're just discussed, it doesn't come across right yet, or may not for a while, and needs help and whatsoever. But in the meantime, you're raising capital. I think there is from my perspective, and I'm not sure if everybody's going to agree with this, it's early and often, it's at every opportunity. You have to be aggressive. It's almost like those that succeed in this can succeed in a lot of different things, if only because they're not cynical or pessimistic about it. They're always hopeful, and they're always seeing the future. They're seeing what's possible. It's that kind of personality that tends to survive, if not thrive, in this kind of thing. And you just have to get it in your mind that I likened it to dating. You go into a bar and you meet 100 people, and the stats. You can be rejected 98 times, but there's a couple of people that like you.
We hope.
Well, what I've always found very useful when getting into a new venture is to find people who'll tear it apart. So I'll put together a presentation, and then I'll go to someone who I respect in the field, and I will basically listen to them tear apart that presentation. Anything that can make you better early on will save you a lot of time later on. And the important thing I would have to say is people always talk about friends and family. You don't have friends and family for long. if you fail as an entrepreneur, and so really it's important to make sure when you're bringing in capital that you do it you structure it in such a way that you're going to keep your friends and family, and that you don't give away too much early on. I mean that's what I've always found, because later on you're going to bump in. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. There is that other part of the family you can always pitch out. No.
Let me just supplement. The minute I really agree with Peter, you have to get outside input as early as possible and as often as possible, right through the process. Personally, I like to advise that you raise money when you don't need it. Which means that you're out pitching all the time. The minute Peter starts to talk to people and ask people to shred his ideas apart, he's fundraising. And the feedback that you get back from whatever source, of course, you're the decision maker, you figure out how much to filter. But the person who listens and can flex is a smart entrepreneur. The world just has so many different factors and so many different layers and so many different facets that the person who can integrate a lot of information and pivot quickly will be the winner.
Great points. All right, so the next question is for Paul and Catherine. It's, what are the biggest misconceptions that entrepreneurs have about investors and the process?
Okay, I'll tell you some misconceptions, but I don't know whether they're the biggest or not. But when I look at your company, I'm going to see 300 companies this year, and I'm going to do 2. So it doesn't mean I don't like you. It doesn't mean your idea is a bad idea, because I don't really know whether it's a good idea or a bad idea for sure. I'm going to look at a company that I think I can make 10 times my money on, 10x. And the reason for that is I know that I'm going to lose all of my money on half the deals I do. I'm going to get a little bit back on about another 40%, and I'm going to be a success or failure depending on if that 1 in 10 could give me a 10x. And that turns out, when you do the math and run it, it gives you about a 2 to 3x fund. That is the money that people give me to invest. If I want to return 2 times that or 3 times that, I have to get, given the odds of success, I have to get, everything that comes to me that I do has to look like a 10x. I have to see your deal and say I'm going to make 10 times the money on it in a success scenario. That's not the same for all stages of private equity. That's for early stage venture investing. And it's amazing how frequently the math works. So I can think you have a really good deal and a really good chance to double the money in 2 years. Not interested. Triple the money in 2 years. Not interested. If it doesn't look like it can do 10x, it doesn't work in my math. It just won't, because half of you guys are gonna fail, right? And the great thing about Silicon Valley is we let things fail, I think. People say it's all the smart people in the universities, et cetera. It's no. It's where's Sun Microsystems? Where's Digital Equipment? Where's Alta Vista? You know, where will Yahoo be in a couple of years, right? Who knows? But my point is that we let things fail here, and it's like agriculture. You know, things die and they become the fertilizer for the next generation, and somebody walks into my office. But some guy walks into my office and fails, and I don't throw him out because he failed once. I just don't. And that's, you know, that doesn't occur in a lot of other places in the world. That's what makes Silicon Valley unique. That doesn't occur in a lot of other fields. That's what makes this culture tremendous. Anybody watching Silicon Valley, by the way? I was so scared they would get it wrong, you know. And I could just see my relatives in Iowa thinking, boy, that's over the top. And I'm like, no, that's not really over the top. That stuff really happens. Anyway, that's my contribution.
Misconceptions. I would say the first one that I see very often is that people think that they are really already fundraising when they have a pitch. You want to get all the way into bed with somebody. Having shown a pitch is just ringing the doorbell. That's misconception number 1. Okay? It is a process. It has all the way to the end. So the misconception number 2 is that they put investors in a black box or on the other side of the table and they approach them. You have to remember that we're people too, and all we want to do is make money. It's very simple, right? And what you've got to sell, and by the way, it is a sale process, okay? So if you don't have a product to sell, would you go to the market and start selling it? No. If you're not ready to engage with an investor, do not start pitching. So that's misconception number 2. And by ready, I mean you want to close a deal. It's just like when you sell, you want to get a transaction going. So think through the entire investment process, be ready for it up front, so that when you meet somebody on the airplane, you have a 30-second conversation and you can hook them.
No, I agree with that absolutely, 100%. That when you finally get that right presentation together, and it shouldn't be long, and it's hard-hitting, it tells everything you got to tell anybody about you and everything about everybody else that's trying to do what you're trying to do. But that's just the beginning of the process, remember now, because there's due diligence. And if you yourself at that point have not tested your own assumptions, and that's not modeled up into a real enterprise, into a business, and a functioning business, you're not prepared to answer any of the questions that are going to come immediately thereafter. And that process goes on for a while. And the drilling down part, you know, I hear so many pitches part, and the vast majority I never do anything with. More than likely, the concept which first was introduced is not, it doesn't play out. That's where it breaks down. So you know, you got to get all the ducks in line. You have to get your models in order. You have to test your assumptions. You have to, you know, you have to establish and prove out your forecasts and so forth in and around. Then at the end of the day, you have to be able to tell everyone realistically what the exit's going to look like and how much money is going to be made for your investors. And so that's what I would add. I put a lot of emphasis on that what's underneath the pitch.
And don't get me wrong. I don't mean to say you have to be so ready that you don't go out. In fact, going out is part of the process, but don't expect that the first few conversations you had are going to result in something. Treat them as, I'm doing research right now. I'm trying to understand your need so that I can do the right kind of pitch. So imagine that to be market research, just like you're market researching for your product, okay? And then so when you go into a real sales situation, you understand what your customer, in the case investor, but what your customer is looking for and has a pain that you can actually address.
Okay, great. And kind of continuing on Kathy's analogy of a relationship and where you're at in the process. So you're in the dating process, you're filling out the investors, and you've had kind of a warm relationship up to now, and then maybe it's that potential investor's gone silent. Is there anything you can do to regain that connection or to reestablish that relationship? Paul, could I have you take a stab at that one?
How to get the second base question.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, one of the benefits of being referred originally is you can use your referral source as a way to back channel. It's always great to have a back channel if you can do it. If you got, let's say you went and first thing you did is you incorporated and you got a lawyer who you like, and I know that's kind of an oxymoron, but if you got a lawyer who's competent and he knows some VCs and he called a VC and got you a meeting, that's one way to get a meeting. And then after the pitch, you know, call him back up and say, hey, you know, I need you to call the VC because he'll take your call because he's got to do business with you for the next 20 years, and see what he thought, you know, because VCs notoriously won't tell you to your face exactly why you didn't get called back. And sometimes it's as simple as, you know, I went, right after the meeting, I got on a plane for 2 weeks, and then when I got back, I got inundated with 4,000 emails, and I forgot all about it. I just didn't get back to that maid. And sometimes it's, my God, that guy was an idiot, didn't know his business. So it could be anything. And the other thing I want to add to this is that not getting funded is not the worst thing in the world. The worst thing in the world is a false positive. The worst thing in the world is to get funded on a bad idea. The worst thing in the world is to have your first 3 customers grab your product and then never see another customer. Because your most valuable resource is your time. You have maybe 3 rolls of the dice in your life to do this. Most people only have 1. You maybe have, if you're a serial entrepreneur, you maybe have 3. So if you're going to fail, you want to fail early because you want to get on to the next thing. The worst thing that happened to me in my career is I got funding for what ended up being not a very good idea, and it was easy for me to raise money because of my reputation, et cetera, and I thought it was a really good idea, and I needed to listen to the market better. I should have understood that when everybody else is raising the money easily and I'm raising it but it's hard, there's information in that. And man, it would have been much better if I just shut that company down after raising the first $4 or $5 million. It would have been painful, would have made me feel like I failed. But when I look at what the other opportunities I could have had and could have run through afterwards, rather than spending the next 7 years of my life beating my head against a wall, it would have been a much better outcome, I think, overall. So not getting funded there's information in that.
That's so true. We look at 60 deals, that is 60 applications. Each cycle, which is every quarter, we select 5 companies to present. Between the 60 and the 5, all the fallouts, I usually get maybe 2 or 3 entrepreneurs come back and say, why didn't I get picked? And I try to respond to those people because they're smart by asking the question. And then the ones that are referred, okay, if they fail, I will sometimes actually reach out and offer a feedback. So we're slightly different from the VCs because we don't care what the entrepreneurs think. Well, we do, but we want to be respectful of the fact that they're applying, and we want to encourage them to kind of keep getting really important feedback. And many actually entrepreneurs say, even if they don't get money, thank you, this process has taught me a lot, I'm adjusting my thinking. And that's a valuable time spent too.
All right, great. So you see a tremendous amount of entrepreneurs out there. What makes you sit up and take notice? Robert, do you want to?
Yeah. So I would say the first, being from the healthcare sector, the first thing that we have to look at is some understanding of the healthcare space. So I would think, that as kind of laughable as it sounds, right now there's a lot of people trying to work in healthcare that may not have enough experience, in my opinion. So that aside, I think we've kind of looked at probably 5 or 6, maybe 7, I was just writing down, qualities that we look for in an entrepreneur. And they're not in any particular order, but I think the first one, probably the most amorphous, is business judgment. And with a lot of entrepreneurs that haven't had prior success like Paul, we have to look at other metrics or markers. So we look for other experiences in their life, their career decisions, their last role, did they launch a product, how did it go, to understand judgment. Another big area for us is whether they're coachable. And not by us in particular, but by data, the market, others. So we're not, we consider ourselves to be kind of invited guests to the party of the entrepreneur, but every entrepreneur will have to be coached by the market, by other people, by other influences. And that's really important to be able to pivot, because a lot of companies need to pivot to be successful. Another area that we find really important is schedule-driven people versus perfection-driven people. So this is something that we probably all have experienced as Hopkins graduates. There's a lot of perfection required at Hopkins as an undergrad or even any of the grad schools. And when you're in a company, part of that can work against you. And so really being schedule-driven, especially from an investor perspective, is important. Not in everything, but in a lot of things is really important. We look at the company that you keep. So your team, your customers, really reflects on you. So if you can recruit great people that are, hopefully smarter than you in a lot of areas and more experienced, that speaks volumes about your potential success. Are you persistent? Have you been able to overcome challenges in the past, looking failure in the face day after day? That's really important. We just diligenced an entrepreneur over the last couple of weeks, and that was a major key area that we were excited about with this individual, that he had done this a number of times before, not in companies in particular, but in areas of situations that had failure before. And then last, I think, is data-driven. This seems obvious, but you'll be given a lot of data from the market, informal and formal, and how you respond to data is really important, because that's the way we figure out, or that's the way an entrepreneur often will figure out when it's time to pivot or to change strategy.
All right, great, thank you.
How do you figure out if they're schedule-driven, and how do you know if they're data-driven?
Yeah. So all of these things we just mentioned come typically toward the latter end of a diligence process. We do a number of calls that we call blinded and unblinded, with people that you've worked with in the past that have seen you. And I can give you examples of we were vetting a CEO who had come from a product management role at Google, and brilliant guy. But one thing we learned was that from his former manager was that he was often late with specific schedule. So I think we do lots of calls with people that you work with, some of which you'll know about, some of which you won't, to try to answer these questions. The second one was data-driven. Again, in the same light, we'll ask for situations where they receive data on a product back from the market. What happened? For example, in this product management manager's perspective, did they think about new strategies, or did they continue to kind of hammer on the same approach?
All right, Matt, do you want to take a stab at that? Do you have any additional?
No, I mean, I was just thinking of all the examples of how it is that we interact with the teams that we, in the companies to which we invest. I think there's a little bit of a difference here, and that is that we tend to invest in companies in and around a core expertise on our side of the fence. I mean, we have in-depth knowledge of, we have a crystal ball, and we're peering into this thing, and we're kind of seeing where policy intersects with capital, intersects with technology, and we're predicting a world where things are shifting. Everything's moving around right now in the energy sector, in the electricity sector in particular, and coming into question, for example, is will a traditional regulated utility be part of the, where are they going to fit in the future? It's no longer how are we going to fit into what it is that they're doing? How are they going to fit into our world? Everything's networked now, everything's controlled, everything's shifting such that, in the broad view of things, we may not have lines, telephone or electricity lines to our homes in the future, businesses even. So with that knowledge, we're looking at companies that can play key roles. I mean, Nest is a good example. What is that going to look like? And if we invest in these teams, we often can come in as a team member, and we can give them insights and advise them on take what you got, but can you put it over here? Can you expand that part, because we our research shows that part of the market is going to be pretty hot. So it's a little bit different. We're not putting too much trust and confidence in the management teams. We're taking good racehorses and we're letting them flex. Show us what you got with what your idea is. But we're investing in because we believe in that, but we also believe in this over here, and we think you can pivot. We can help you pivot. And it's a little bit more interactive.
So it's more about the alignment between you and your organization is a key part, the relationships there. Okay, in the interest of time, because this has been really dynamic, I want to make sure we answer some questions in the audience. Do we have any? Robert Bennett, role and opportunity for joint ventures, investments with Mexico, given the emerging, in the number of given the emerging economy and growth and a number of engineers. So can you, insights on, I guess, Mexico is the target here. So do you have any thoughts on Mexico specifically?
Well, I spent half my career, as I mentioned, traveling around emerging markets, finding companies. Really, integrity was the number one thing that I would look for when I would visit a company. Early on in the days of Russia, the wall coming down and Russia becoming capitalist, if you will, I went to a company, Ugans, and the president had just issued himself a huge number of shares. And he thought this was like options in the West. And he issued them, these shares to himself at no cost. So I asked him if I could have shares at no cost too. Yes, exactly. For which the analyst I was with became very pale, and the rest of the meeting didn't go particularly well. But, but really what I would always do is just look for integrity. I would find companies in many markets where the family would own the distribution company separate to the capital-intensive industrial facility. So they'd try and raise money for the industrial facility, and then they'd transfer price right through to the family through the distribution company. So really, when looking at emerging markets, it's very important to make sure that you're investing with management that really understand what's how to run a company properly and create shareholder value. In relationship to engineers, I don't think I answered that question. No. But since my name's Peter Bennett and it was for Robert Bennett, possibly this whole question was for someone else anyway.
Can I just supplement? I was just at an event that was sponsored by the Spanish government. The whole world has got trade missions here trying to bring their companies here. For some reason, in the I guess that in the 90s, they were all trying to build their own Silicon Valley.
Right.
And I guess in the 21st century, they're recognizing that they couldn't, and they're here now. But part of the audience was actually entrepreneurs who had come from Latin America because of the language link. And I discovered that, in fact, in the Bay Area, there is now a incubator or accelerator focused on opportunities coming in from Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
So that is absolutely happening.
Absolutely. All right, so next question, this I think sounds like it might be a good problem to have. I am confronted with VCs that want to invest more than I'm looking for. Why? And how should I act upon that?
There could be lots of reasons why. And are they, my follow-up question would be, are they valuation sensitive? Because it's all about I got to put $50 million to work in every fund that we do. So it's hard to do that on more than, it's hard to keep track of more than 10 companies at a time at the level that we get involved with them. So again, 50, and I'm doing probably 2 to 3 funds that overlap all the time. So that gives me about 3 companies in each fund. I got to put $50 million to work in each fund. So I got to figure out, do the math. I got to figure out how to get $10 to $20 million to work in every company. So I can't do a lot of $500,000 deals because I can't sit on 400 boards. So that may be part of the dynamic. They clearly think that they may think that you need more money than you think you need. They may particularly like the valuation at this point and want to get more to work at this valuation. There's a number of reasons why they may want to. Now, if what you're saying is you have more VCs than you want, then that's an easy problem. That's just you have more buyers. But at the end of the day, you decide how much you take, and they decide if they're willing to give you that much at that value.
All right.
We just recently advised an entrepreneur who wanted to raise $500,000 to raise $750,000. We felt that they could use the extra capital to get a little bit harder into the market. So oftentimes, entrepreneurs are looking for non-dilution. So they want to raise a little bit, and they want to run a little bit, and then they want to raise more, and so on. But if the market is there, and it's a play that if you're first to market, there's going to be competition, or if it's a land grab and there's going to be competition, then time to market is more important, and therefore getting more capital so you can execute faster is a smarter play.
Sure.
So we run into this a lot when we've got the same deployment challenge that Paul has, where we want to put more to work, say 10 or 20 million instead of 5 or 7. I really think, and I've only been doing this for 2.5 years, but I think far more important than when we count things, we tend to focus on things, numbers that are in front of us. But too often, it seems like to me that if I were on the other side of the table, it'd be more important to think about the things that often aren't counted, that especially those early investors, they can really help or hurt you. And so I think capital aside, valuation aside, within a range, it's really important to get married to the right investor early. And if those people are willing to pay a little bit more and want a more aggressive valuation, but you really think that they're the right people to be on your board, I would focus more on that than a lot of the deal terms. Certain deal terms, obviously this is a general statement, are important, but I think in general, focus more on the partner. As you get later in companies, we take 10% of a company, we're gonna have less influence, you're gonna be on your way, then the deal terms become, I think, a lot more important. As long as you have the entire math to exit in your head when you think about how much you raise and when, at what valuation.
What's the problem?
In your view, what is a disruptive technology or innovation that you're seeing in your particular, that you're investing in right now? Is there some area that you're focusing on?
Well, one area one other someone on the panel mentioned that they had worked in that I think is, and I'm not investing in it because I don't understand it very well, and I don't invest in what I don't understand. But I see the mechanization of the workplace occurring extremely rapidly, and I see robotics becoming tremendously important, and I see manufacturing moving back onshore because now labor costs are a trivial portion of the cost of manufacturing products, and so other things begin to prevail. I think it's a 20 to 30 to maybe 50-year trend. I don't think that's necessarily the hottest thing to invest in tomorrow, but it's a disruption that it's going to change the way we work. It's going to change the nature of work. I think you already see what's happening to middle classes, not just in the U.S., by the way, in many parts of the world. So that's a fundamental change that is inexorable. Where labor cost differentials aren't going to be the big thing to determine where stuff gets made.
I mean, you've probably seen info out there that would tell you that the world is flat, and then things migrate based on certain advantages that some countries have over others. These days, I think the way I look at it is that you're looking more so at natural resources or endowments. That you know, one would argue that Europe, for example, isn't very well endowed when it comes to energy. You know, of course, my world is energy. So you are seeing manufacturing migrate to the United States where you know, where energy isn't expensive. You know, electricity, for example. In fact, it's getting less expensive. I think that these are, you know, how those industries coalesce around those endowments, I think will tell you where the next major growth regions are going to be and where the new tech is going to well up inside of that framework. You know, that said, I think the United States has a particular advantage here right now. I wouldn't suggest that it does not include the Americas, Canada, Mexico, even Latin America, South America, and so forth. But I do see that you have to kind of pay attention to where the resources are to be able to look at what then becomes, you know, like could lay the groundwork for, I wouldn't say disruptive technologies that tend to operate in a way that's much more efficient, that causes us to be able to cut more corners, to leapfrog maybe some of the things that we are doing today that we're just doing as a matter of habit.
Okay.
One other general trend, which is I think obvious to most people up here, but sitting in you know, probably the greatest place in the country to develop software, I think one major trend, and if you think of it as technology, I think it's really important to acknowledge, is the move from you know, enterprise to subscription-based software, and then the move from general subscription-based software or you know, cloud solutions to vertical cloud or SaaS solutions. And some examples to think about that have been recently successful are the Salesforce customer relationship management, which makes Salesforce personnel more functional, more productive. A vertical solution, which is one step beyond that, created by a company called Viva, is specific to, say, the pharmaceutical industry. It's a CRM for pharma tailored to the unique requirements of that vertical industry. That company IPO'd last year, I think trading between $2 and $4 billion now, with a single $5 million investment from a venture firm in the Bay Area. So I think one major trend which is happening is the specificity of subscription or software as a service solutions for industries is commanding higher value than we've seen before.
I think in the United States, privacy and security on mobile is a huge problem that is not being recognized by the users. And while there are many, many solutions that are not being adopted, I think us going the way of Europe is a trend, number one. Number two, I do see a huge, and I mean it's now recognized, Internet of Things. A lot of sensors, a lot of devices getting connected, automatically without human intervention. And what that means in terms of the communication, but also storage and networking and all the rest of it. The last thing is actually on the funding front. I did a panel in a series of panels, rather, over the last 12 months or so on crowdfunding. And I think there's a lot of turgid water in there, a lot of things being stirred up, a lot of different business models being tried, a lot of question about whether that's a viable investment model. But one thing that I'm pretty sure, it hasn't happened yet, but I think that is in fact going to happen, which is that crowdfunding as defined by the SEC and by Congress in the Act, that is raising money from unaccredited investors. And in my opinion, for your neighborhood services, is probably the right thing that's going to happen.
All right. Well, with that, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. There's more networking and food and everything else back there, but I want to give a big hand to our panelists. And David, if I could have you take a couple minutes to explain a little bit more about the Entrepreneur Affinity Group. So if you're not already associated with it, you still have the opportunity.
Hi, guys. So I'm Dave. We kicked this off last year as a part of the local Hopkins alumni chapter. We are interested in two things, I guess. One of which is, as you'd expect, kind of stitching together a really high-value network of folks affiliated with Hopkins, but within this larger entrepreneurial ecosystem. So that's everyone from the buy side to the sell side, and everybody in between, including the lawyers that support the ecosystem. The second, though, is to support and sort of bridge the gap between the West Coast and the East Coast. So figuring out ways to work more closely with Baltimore, and DC, I should mention too, but for the university as a whole. So we think that there are lots of opportunities where we can draw on some of the resources here on the West Coast to help out, mentor, and otherwise make successful some of the entrepreneurs on campus, whether those are students or faculty or whoever. So we are in the middle of trying to figure out how best to do that. Running these kinds of events is one way. Several of us here are actively involved on advisory panels on campus for entrepreneurial activities or the Fast Forward Incubator. If you're interested in joining us, we're an informal group. We meet at least once a month, either here in the city or in Palo Alto at a bar of our choosing. And then First Thursdays, which we also call Thirsty Thursdays. If you're interested, we've got a group of about 80 folks that come on a regular basis. And talk to anybody with a blue badge. They can sign you up for that group. But otherwise, please get in touch with us. We'd love to have you as part of the network. And Radia, I think you had just a couple of words about the affinity groups at large, at Hopkins.
Well, and I just wanted to take the time, thank you so much for appearing for us. The affinity groups are a little bit different. It's a new initiative that Johns Hopkins is actually at the forefront when it comes to alumni relations. It is a bottom-up program instead of an administrative down program. So the affinity engagement, we have a core group of excited alumni. They tell us what they're excited about, in this case entrepreneurship, and then they say, hey, it would be great to have a panel about this, and I know people, and they do the asks, we help with the logistics, everyone comes, everyone is invited from all 9 divisions of Johns Hopkins. Anyone can come to an affinity event as long as they're interested in the topic or they're like-minded, they want to network and meet. There's sort of networking sandwiches. We have unstructured networking at the beginning, usually some kind of formal speaker or panel or program, and then there's networking at the end. So it's really for alumni and their circle of friends. So anyone who's connected by invitation is great with us. So an entrepreneurship is a really popular one right now. We went from 3 affinity groups to 22 affinity groups in the last 2.5 years. So a lot of them are doing programs centered on entrepreneurship. Our Women in Business did a Shark Tank event. We have a law affinity, even though Hopkins doesn't have a law school. Many people have gone on to become lawyers, and they're doing an entrepreneurship. We have an AEME, which is Arts, Entertainment, Media, and Entrepreneurship, and we're doing an entrepreneurship event based in New York. But the thing that's nice about affinities, we have a platform. This will be on the affinity page of the alumni relations page. So we have the website, we have closed LinkedIn groups, the AEME, they're more artsy, they're on Facebook. We also have different groups throughout the country. So the AEME, we started a group in Baltimore because Baltimore caught on to New York and said, hey, we should do it. And then I think Andrew's going to help us do that in LA. So there are many ways, even if you can't be a face-to-face at one of our programs, there are ways to be virtual connections, and that's how we'll connect with Baltimore. Baltimore has a lot of entrepreneurial, there's an incubator and the undergrads. The AEME in New York, one of the entrepreneurs is one of the groups going for the X Prize in biomedical engineering, and we have an undergrad student that is actually going to be one of our panelists. So hop onto the alumni website. I have cards with an address that you can get to that. And there might be other affinities. You can join as many affinities as you want. You can volunteer as much as you want, or you can be as reserved as you'd like. We'd love to have you on board. So that's the affinity program, the spiel for the day. So that's it. Thanks very much.